What you see here is not the Super Mario Bros. You remember. This is Versus Super Mario Bros., an official arcade version released by Nintendo in 1986. It may look familiar, but this version was changed in all sorts of ways. The levels are harder, power-ups have been removed and moved around, enemies show up in new places, the timer can be more aggressive, and some of the shortcuts and extra lives from the home version are completely gone. There are even 6 replacement stages here that would later appear in the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2, better known to us as the Lost Levels. In this video, we're going to look at where Versus Super Mario Bros. Fits into Nintendo's timeline, how it differs from the NES version, why it became so much more difficult, and how this strange version eventually made its way onto the Nintendo Switch. Because this is more than just Super Mario Bros. With a coin slot. It is a missing link between the original game and the much more punishing sequel that followed. Before we get into the game itself, we need to look at the hardware it was made for. Nintendo launched the Versus system in 1984. It was an arcade platform built around technology closely related to the Famicom, which made it much easier for Nintendo to adapt its home games to arcades. Games like Excite Bike, Balloon Fight, Ice Climber, and eventually Super Mario Bros. All made their way onto the system. The Versus system came in a few different forms. There was the single-screen Versus Uni system, the two-screen Versus Dual system, and the red sit-down cabinet that collectors usually call the Red Tent. The games themselves used replaceable ROM chips, so an operator could change what a cabinet was running without having to buy a completely new machine every time. This gave Nintendo a practical way to bring games that looked and played like Famicom or NES releases back into arcades. At home, you could explore, make mistakes, and keep practicing for as long as you wanted. In an arcade, every attempt had a price attached to it. And when Nintendo brought Super Mario Bros. To the Versus system, that difference had a major effect on how the game was designed. The original Super Mario Bros. Was released for the Famicom in Japan in September of 1985. A few months later, it became one of the major games used to introduce the Nintendo Entertainment System to North America. And before long, Mario was practically inseparable from Nintendo's new home console. But while the NES was still being rolled out across the United States, Nintendo was already preparing another version of the game. In March of 1986, Versus Super Mario Bros. Appeared at the American Coin Machine Exposition in Chicago. Early promotional material actually called it Versus Mario's Adventure, but by the time it reached arcades, the name had changed into the one we know today. Then, only a few months later, Nintendo released Super Mario Bros. 2 for the Famicom Disk System in Japan. So the timeline goes, the original game in September of 1985, the arcade version in March of 1986, and the Japanese sequel in June of 1986. That places Versus Super Mario Bros. Directly between the first two games. The arcade release was mainly aimed at markets outside of Japan, appearing in North America and parts of Europe. Nintendo never officially released the physical arcade version in Japan, although some Japanese operators reportedly managed to get their hands on it. That makes its place in Mario history a little unusual, especially since several of its new stages would soon appear in Japan's Super Mario Bros. 2. And as we'll see, Versus Super Mario Bros. Helps show how Nintendo moved from the original game toward the much tougher sequel that followed. The arcade version was already more difficult than the NES game, but the person running the machine could make it even worse. Inside the cabinet was a bank of physical switches called dip switches. These allowed the arcade operator to change several parts of the game without modifying the software. They could decide whether you started with 2 lives or 3. They could make the timer run at its normal speed or set it to move faster. They could also change when you earned an extra life, with options ranging from 100 coins all the way up to 250. Even the continue system could be adjusted, bringing you back with either 3 or 4 lives. Then there was the coin settings. Depending on how the machine was configured, 1 coin could give you 1 credit. Several coins could be required for a single credit, or the game could even be placed into free play mode. So somewhere inside the cabinet was basically a row of switches labeled Make Mario Worse. And these settings were completely separate from all the harder level designs we're going to look at. Before you even reached World 1-1, the arcade operator had already decided how many chances you received, how quickly the clock moved, and how much each attempt was going to cost. On the NES, every copy of Super Mario Bros. Played the same way, but in an arcade, 2 machines running Versus Super Mario Bros. Could offer noticeably different levels of difficulty, depending on how generous the owner was feeling. The arcade operator could adjust the difficulty, but even on the most generous settings, Nintendo had already gone through the game and made it much less forgiving. Power-ups were moved to harder locations, replaced with coins, or removed completely. Some hidden one-up mushrooms were gone, more enemies were added, and several stages had extra pits or less time on the clock. Nintendo also reused some of the repeated stages differently. In the NES version, when a level returns later in the game, the second version is usually more difficult. In Versus Super Mario Bros., Nintendo sometimes skips the easier layout and uses the hard version right away. But some of the most interesting changes were aimed directly at players who already knew how to take advantage of the original game. The Koopas on certain staircases were replaced with Goombas, blocking the popular one-up trick in World 3-1, where you could bounce on a shell and quickly build up extra lives. In World 4-2, the warp zones leading to Worlds 7 and 8 were removed, so you could no longer use that shortcut to jump close to the end of the game. Nintendo also removed bricks near the pipe at the end of World 1-2, making the usual minus world setup much harder to perform. The strange part is that they did not actually remove the minus world itself. The glitch is still in the game. Nintendo mostly just tried to block the entrance. And if you do manage to get inside, this version sends you to a looping underwater area based on the small swimming section of World 6-2. I did an entire video exploring the minus worlds across different versions of Super Mario Bros., so check that out if you want to see exactly how this one works. The important thing here is that Nintendo clearly understood where experienced players found shortcuts, extra lives, and a little breathing room in the original game. Instead of only making the levels harder, it went after the safety nets players had learned to rely on. The biggest changes in Versus Super Mario Bros. Are the 6 stages Nintendo replaced entirely. These are not small edits to familiar levels. They are much tougher layouts, built around longer jumps, tighter spaces, and more dangerous enemy placement. World 1-4 takes familiar castle pieces and rearranges them with more lava and additional fire bars. World 3-2 includes a large gap where you need to uncover hidden blocks and use them to reach a pipe suspended above the stage. World 6-4 combines difficult jumps with long fire bars that leave very little room for error. And the later stages keep pushing things further, with a harsher underwater level in World 7-2 and an extended bridge in World 7-3 filled with gaps, paratroopas, and flying Cheep Cheeps. World 6-3 is another good example of how demanding these new stages could be. It features a series of long platform jumps, including one where you have to bounce from a Koopa Paratroopa to reach the next platform. That same general stage later appeared in the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2, but Mario gets less height from enemy bounces in the arcade version, which makes that particular jump even less forgiving here. And that brings us to the most important thing about these 6 stages. All of them were later reused in Super Mario Bros. 2 for the Famicom. So overseas arcade players were seeing pieces of Mario's sequel before the sequel had even been released. Versus Super Mario Bros. Was not borrowing stages from Super Mario Bros. 2. These arcade stages came first. Beyond the harder levels and missing power-ups, Versus Super Mario Bros. Has a number of smaller changes that give it a different feel from the NES version. Some of the colors look slightly different because of the custom graphics hardware used by the Versus system. The easiest example is Fire Mario, who has a much more yellow appearance here compared to the familiar red and white look from the NES game. The coin counter was expanded to 3 digits, and the game keeps track of high scores like you would expect from an arcade release. If you manage to finish the game, you can enter your initials, and the ending awards bonus points based on how many lives you have left. The ending music is also extended. But one thing you do not get is the second quest hard mode from the NES version. Once you beat the arcade game, the experience is over. Most of these changes are small on their own, but together they shift the focus towards performance. Your score matters, your remaining lives matter, and every attempt feels like something meant to be compared with the next person who steps up to play. The NES version feels like a game you can settle into and learn over time. The arcade version feels more like a challenge you're expected to prove yourself against. More than 30 years after the original arcade release, Versus Super Mario Bros. Finally made its way home. Hamster released the game for Nintendo Switch as part of the Arcade Archive series on December 22nd, 2017. This gave players an official way to experience the arcade version without tracking down an original Versus cabinet. And it also marked the first official release of the game in Japan. The Switch port includes display and screen filter options, adjustable difficulty settings, online high score rankings, and the original alternating 2-player mode. There is also one known arcade revision with even faster timer settings that is not included here, but unless you're really digging into the different board versions, the Arcade Archives release gives you the main versus Super Mario Bros. Experience. The timing of this release also created a very strange situation. Nintendo Switch Online, along with its library of NES games, did not launch until September of 2018. That means for roughly 9 months, Versus Super Mario Bros. Was the only official version of the original Super Mario Bros. You could play on Switch. So before Nintendo gave Switch owners the regular NES game, they gave them the version that removed power-ups, blocked shortcuts, and tried to eat their lunch money. For a brief period, this obscure arcade release was the Switch's Super Mario Bros. Versus Super Mario Bros. Begins with the same basic game people already know from the NES. The same physics, the same music, and many of the same worlds are still here. But Nintendo gradually removes things that made the home version easier to manage. There are fewer power-ups, fewer shortcuts, less time, more enemies, and new stages designed for players who had already learned the original game. Those ideas did not end in the arcade. 6 of the new stages carried into Super Mario Bros. 2 in Japan, where Nintendo pushed this tougher style even further. That sequel did not suddenly appear as the cruel version of Mario. You can see that transformation beginning here. Versus Super Mario Bros. May look like the original game with a coin slot attached, but it really is the point when Nintendo began turning its first Mario adventure into a challenge for expert players. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks so much for your time today. Goodbye.